Hey, we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another coaching conversation. I am here with Scott McAllister, who is an executive coach. And Scott, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
So I'm Scott McAllister. Thank you for those that are out there and have joined. Very excited to be here with you, Todd. And my passion in life, and I have a bit of a thesis, is that we need to bring to the corporate space, to the workplace, much more centered leaders that have a North Star, are clear on their values and their superpowers, and can show up in a strong, steady state that way. So my coaching business, I coach mid to senior level executives. I help them to understand their North Star. And what I mean by that is what is important to them, what has meaning. And then from that, we unlock peak performance. We elevate their life's fulfillment in that process. So my focus, I kind of think of myself a little bit as a corporate healer of helping people through having that focus and that mission. And people on a calling and with a mission are unstoppable. That even with all the stress going on in our society and the pace of change, which is really creating challenges inside of the workplace, those centered leaders can stand strong and tall and stay in their best selves.
And I'm hearing your mission and your calling coming through really, really strongly in what you're describing. So it's, you're eating what you cook, it sounds like. And I like that.
Very much so. Very much so.
Awesome.
It took me years to get here, 30 years of corporate work as a senior executive, but now as a coach and trying to bring this out into the space, I see it as a bit of a pebble in the water and sending ripples of healing out into the space.
Awesome. And that's a really good segue because our topic today is healed leaders. And this was something that you suggested and is really, really resonant for me too. So I wonder if I'm going to put you on the spot, I'd love to know what it was. Like, what is it about healed leaders? What do you mean when we say that?
So back to the thesis, I am hearing from so many of my clients that there is a bit of an epidemic right now with toxicity in the workplace, which is very unfortunate. And I think we've all seen this somewhere in our career along the way. All it takes is one leader. What do they say? People don't leave companies, they leave leaders. And I don't think as leaders, we realize how much of an impact we have on our direct reports and throughout the organization, that ripple effect, good or bad. But it amplifies as it goes through, or there's a repeater effect as it goes through. And hearing so many people talking about these challenging situations kind of caught my attention. And I was thinking about, well, is there a way to actually address and solve this? And saw a bit of a connection in the work that I've become passionate about in finding my own passion and mission in this executive coaching and helping people find their North Star. Well, what if I could create more centered leaders in the workspace, and would that have an impact? And the more that I started talking to some of my clients and the more that I reflected on it, won't solve everything. It's not a panacea, but it sure could go in the right direction to start helping address the challenge that I think we face.
I think, what's really interesting to me about that, and I've got a bit of a mind read here because what you're describing, Scott, is it's my past. You're describing my corporate past, right? I was one of those leaders, and I'm making up maybe you were too. And I think it's one of the things that I'm really loving about this conversation, because I think you're the first person that I talked to in one of these where our backgrounds have been so similar. And again, I'm making that up, so maybe I'm wrong. But that the idea of a healed leader, it's that phrase, right? Like, abusers will abuse. Well, so will those who've been healed, will they heal? And what's possible within that context, right? And it's really, really interesting because you're right. It's getting worse, not better. And that's evidence that it's not just, anecdotal evidence that you've heard, that I've heard within our practice, but, Deloitte, I think, recently published a piece on wellness and mental health in the workspace, and where it's getting worst is within the upper echelons of executive leaderships.
Mm-hmm.
So what to do?
Yeah, and first thing is understanding what's driving this. And my thesis and hypotheses around that is we are in unprecedented times in terms of the pace of change. And we as corporate leaders and just human beings, we're not made to deal with this level of change and stress. Humans by nature don't enjoy change, right? It's Who Moved My Cheese, right? Famous book, sold millions and millions of copies, all about humans not liking change. And we've gone to the point where it's this flywheel that's just going so quickly now. And what happens, I'm certified with the Hogan assessment, which has the bright and the dark behaviors. And the dark behaviors come out during times of strong stress. Well, that's every day now in the corporate America.
Exactly.
So if you don't check yourself, you can very easily slide into those dark behaviors that can look like over controlling or overly grandiose or narcissistic or abusive. Like there's so many different directions that can go. And those are on the far, far edge, of course. But I think that is the start of it. Now, we're not going to change the pace of change. With artificial intelligence on the scene, this is only going to go faster. So if you can't solve what's causing the problem, how can you help people be better prepared when the problem shows up?
Ooh, that's really, really interesting. My friend Katerina would say that this is about nervous system and regulating the nervous system and making sure that we can stay out of the threat response, like the standard fight, flight, freeze, fawn kind of spaces, because those are the things I think that you're describing, like those dark behaviors that show up in leaders. And the really interesting thing that you said to me was, well, if we can't change the thing that's causing the problem, can we change how we respond to the problem? We almost respond rather than react. And what's coming up for me as you say that is like, well, what if changing how we respond to the problem actually helps change the system in which the problem is created? And what I mean by that is all of our systems are human systems. Like the rate of change that we're experiencing is manufactured. Well, who's it manufactured by? And when that happens, like when you've got leaders who are in that space, that there's just sort of space, that there's space to not have to react, that there's space to respond. What choices are you going to make, and how will they be different? And I don't know the answer to those questions, but there's sort of a wealth of openness and possibility that comes from that, even though it starts with, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I don't want to do, I don't like this thing that I feel like I've been trained to do, that I've worked so hard to get to. And I want something better. And something becomes possible on the other side, I think.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking back to experiences where it's already happened.
Okay.
So I was blessed enough to work for American Express for almost 10 years. And the entire time I was at American Express, Ken Chenault was the CEO, probably one of the greatest CEOs of all time. And just to give a little bit of extra color to that, somebody else had posted something about Ken, and I reposted and put my own kind of share of like, he was such an inspirational leader, and crafted just an amazing culture at American Express. And the amount of response to that, that people like that, thumbed it up and made comments.
I saw that post.
Insane, the amount of response. And I would point to that and say, that's a place where the leader was in their best self, stayed away from those dark side behaviors, and had a mission and a calling, and look at the impact geez, 11 years later,
Yeah.
people are still saying, wow, that
Mhm.
was amazing. And I would also say I've been blessed to work at a lot of great places, but American Express, that network, when you reach out, people pick up the
Mhm.
phone and they want to
Mhm.
help. And I think that that is a reflection. And it at its heart, American Express is a service company. You can't charge
True.
$700 for a piece of plastic for the
Mhm.
piece of plastic. There's something
Exactly.
more there. There is a service ethos. So I
Mhm.
think that had a part of it too. But the leadership of Ken and others, somebody like Al Kelly, Ed Gilligan, these
Mhm.
people created an amazing, I'll call it playground or playing
Mhm.
field for us to feel supported, but
Mhm.
also challenged. And I remember Ken would say it was his job to both inspire with the vision, but ground us in reality.
Hmm. Can we talk about Ken for a little bit? Because that's really interesting to me. Like because I will admit, like I have experienced that kind of leadership from time to time too. It's the exception rather than the rule. And I think that's true based on you're not in your head. So I'm going to guess that that's the same for you too. So when you say that Ken created an environment where you felt supported, what was that? Like what was support within that context?
So let me tell a story. And I was not there for that for
Sure.
this story, but it's a little bit of the passing down of stories within the
Hmm.
organization that craft the culture. Um, we know what a horrible day 9/11 was.
Yes.
And the World Financial Center, where American Express sits, is right across the street
Hmm.
from where that all occurred. And it
Hmm.
actually impacted, there's a winter garden, all full glass, where it blew every piece
Hmm.
of glass out. It did
Yeah.
impact the building. They had to leave the building for a time period and work in different places. And
Hmm.
the story that I heard was about, and there was one group in the whole company that happened to be in one of the towers. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, on 100 something floor, they did not
Oh,
survive. There's
okay.
still a monument to those people.
Right.
Story that I heard was that at the first town hall meeting, and there were always these town hall meetings, you knew you arrived as a leader when you had your own town hall. You had
Right.
enough organization that you could address the town hall.
Yep.
And Ken, I don't know where they had it because it wouldn't have been, there was a 26th floor of the World Financial Center with this big auditorium that people would gather in. They weren't in that
Hmm.
building. I don't know where it happened, but the story was told that he was addressing everyone
Hmm.
and was pretty choked up himself.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it was that there were people in the front row that were crying or how that happened, but he went and he embraced one of the
Hmm.
employees that was crying. That is empathy and love
Hmm.
and leadership.
Hmm.
So I think that story may give you a little bit of a feel for what
Hmm.
type of leader and human being he
Hmm.
was and what that then pervaded down through the organization.
Thank you. I love that. That's a great story, and something that you said just really jumped out at me. You used the word love, and it's not a word that we use within a business context very frequently, is it? Um, and now I'm getting a little choked up because I there's the examples of really excellent leaders that I can think of. That's a word that shows up, and not in a like in a like it's different. Like the expressions of love within that context are
Mhm.
different, and it seems to me that it's almost like a recognition of humanity. We've those of us who are old enough, I suppose, in and have been in corporate long enough, have that experience of leave your personal life at home and you go to work, and I, my family used to say to me that there was work Todd and there was home Todd, and they were two different people.
Mhm.
And they were very, very glad that the person at work was not the person who came home. and what I'm hearing you say within the context, like if we go back to our topic of healed leaders, what I'm hearing you say is that there's an opportunity within that healing process to reintegrate. Right? It's not like who I am is who I am, not who I am at work versus who I am at home versus who I am, in this setting or this setting or this setting. And what happens when we reintegrate? And what happens when we reintegrate, not just, with the people around us, but with everything around us?
Well, here's an interesting thing. We're both coaches, executive coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and we know in our field, we are taught to constantly invest in ourselves and do our own work. Because
Yes.
one of the things we do as coaches is hold the space, the
Mm-hmm.
container, as we call it in coactive training,
Mm-hmm.
for our clients so that they feel safe and in a trusted space to be able to be all that they are,
Mm-hmm.
and to really enable them to grow the way they want to grow and achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
Why would it be any different for a corporate leader?
Mm-hmm.
Because you are bringing your stuff into your leadership. And
Yep.
Lord knows the ones that we've seen that are not good, we all know there's some
Mm-hmm.
broken stuff going on. That some of that, and again, this is in that dark behavior. There's the light and the dark. It's you go to severe stress and it brings out, it's not bad people. It's they're in an extreme stress. Let's be honest. These jobs are incredibly stressful and demanding. And we live in a hyper-connected world 24/7. Somebody's always working. So it's understandable how they end up where they end up. But if they've done the rich, deep self-work to show up as their best selves, I would argue it would make a massive difference. And for Ken Chenault to do what he did, as I described in that moment, and embracing I think it was more than one employee, it was multiple employees.
Of course.
You have to be very comfortable in your own skin and confident and know who you are. Because some people would construe that as weakness of, you're emotional and you're giving a hug and no, this is the deepest openness. Like that is, you are vulnerable. And you have to be in a great place as a human being in order to show that vulnerability.
Oh, and I think that's so true. I in my corporate career, I spent a long time building armor to protect myself. And I've told this story before, I think, but I haven't told it to you, so I'm going to say no. I spent a long time building armor and wearing that armor so that I would be, safe, and so that I could be successful, whatever that meant within the context of what I was doing. And you're right. It wasn't until I went through some of the coach training and did some of that deep work that I realized that armor was actually a weakness, not a strength. Because here's the thing that's so cool about vulnerability within the context of leadership is if you're strong, if you're sure of yourself, I'm going to use the word love again, if you love yourself, if you have self-worth, if you understand all of that stuff that's in here and that it's important, then it's not so precious or fragile that it needs armor.
Yes.
And that was a huge aha to me. And I guess if there's anyone listening to this right now who's sort of in that leadership space and going like, oh, wait a minute, I kind of feel like that. The question that I would ask is, what is your armor? And what would it be like just to take off one piece? What would happen? Just one piece. Just to start, maybe it's the helmet, maybe it's the glove, maybe it's, one boot, who knows?
and as a leader, that vulnerability demonstrates to the people that work for us that we're human beings. Yeah. And whether you're Ken Chenault or the president or prime minister of a nation, they're all people.
Yep.
They're human beings. We're all fallible. We all have our strengths, we have our development areas.
Yep.
And
Oh yeah.
I think that, we both had long corporate careers. So I remember being very junior, and you put these people on a pedestal. And I started at GE when Jack Welch was there. So I've been blessed to work
Yep.
in organizations led by Jack Welch, Michael Dell, Ken Chenault,
Wow.
just really amazing corporate leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing what a difference that can make
Yep.
when they show up in a way that they show some vulnerability. And actually, each of them in their own way showed some vulnerability. It's very different between a Ken Chenault and a Jack Welch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Michael Dell was very much a ho-hum, I'm a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
I remember distinctly, I was a summer intern. This is a fun story. I was a summer intern at Dell many moons ago when I was getting my graduate degree at North Carolina. And we had these sessions with the senior leaders. And this day happened to be, there was maybe 60, 70 of us that were summer interns from all over the country. Mm-hmm. And that day was Michael Dell. And there was a fire alarm. So everybody out. And everybody kind of circled up into different groups. And I realized in my little circle, right next to me here was Michael Dell. Like, whoa, this is the big guy. His name's on every building around here. Yep. And I saw everybody had their Dell badges. And back in the day, the numbers reflected what employee they were. Okay. So, Michael, yours has number 1. You're the first employee. And he was so down to earth and a normal person, and almost a little bit, he's very humble, almost a little bit nerdy. And I don't think he'd be upset that I said, like, he's a computer guy.
Yeah.
And that type of vulnerability made him approachable.
Mm-hmm.
And so the argument would be, there's the knowing where you're coming from, where you're going, and coming with a calling, but also doing the self-work to know your values, your strengths, and where you need to develop yourself. Because there, the armor isn't as important anymore. Why do I need the armor if I already, the power of self-love, I think you said this, that loving yourself is the beginning to world peace.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that got to do that.
Well, or fortunately, because really that's just a matter of like, what's the aha? Because it's going to be different for everyone. And at some point there's that aha. It's like, oh, wait, I don't have to do this anymore. Because the other thing that's really true too is wearing that armor is exhausting. Yeah. Like, it takes a lot of effort to put it on every day and to wear it to work and to keep it on and to make sure that, that it isn't dented or whatever. And it's just so much easier if you can just trust yourself and trust what's underneath the armor, that it's not going to get hurt.
Yeah. Well, and you then are demonstrating for those around you that it's okay to be yourself. That you can show up with your whole self.
Yeah. And it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not know the answer. And it's okay to ask your team to figure something out, right? Like, the big thing for me, in my past, I was an agile coach. Like, my thing was implementing agile within development teams, and which I'm still a big fan of. And the big difference, like what's actually different here isn't, we have sprints and we have iterative development and we have pair programming or whatever it is, right? It's we're stopping telling people what to do, and instead we're asking them to solve problems. And if we can just sort of get the leaders to the point where it's like, I don't need to know how to solve this problem. What I need to do is I need to find the people who are the smart ones, who know how to solve the problem, and then trust them enough to do it. And the question then isn't who do I trust? It's, what do I need about myself? What do I need here to be able to trust?
Now you got the other really powerful word, trust.
Yeah.
Once you have that love for yourself and that confidence, so much easier to trust.
Exactly. Because then, maybe someone will make a mistake. That's okay. What are they going to learn from it?
Well, and I think we've seen, and I did a lot of, I led marketing and digital experiences in my career, so I'm very familiar with Agile. And that approach teaches you that constant iteration of putting things out there in micro doses, and you'll find out some things work, some things don't. You do it fast, so you don't bet the farm. We're both old enough, we probably remember waterfall days of you work for like 18 months and then launch. And if it didn't go well, you were hosed. You spent 18 months. And now you think of that kind of the line of, before it was like nothing, nothing, nothing. If this is the value, it's like out and this is time. All of a sudden it launches it here. In Agile, it's constantly growing. And I would argue you learning so much that you're actually going to far exceed when you're just betting the farm with a waterfall type of approach.
Oh, I agree. I agree completely. And that just makes an awful lot of sense. And the thing that makes Agile work is that trust and collaboration. Because you can't be a command and control leader and have a functioning Agile team. It won't work.
Well, I would argue command and control can work in a place where you are ripping cost out and breaking something down to a point. It's not pleasant, but it's doable. But I would also argue you aren't going to grow if you can't trust your people to bring each of them to bring their brilliance to the table. Because growth requires a very different mindset and approach and needs everyone's involvement. And that diverse perspective, the culmination, the addition, the summation, that's the power.
Oh, yeah. And yes, because it doesn't leave, even if you are the smartest person in the room, if you're the only brain that's actually making decisions and being innovative, and there's 10, 20, 50, 100 other brains that are just doing what you say, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be an innovation. You're going to be left in the dark.
And enough companies have created cultures that believe in the spreading out in the empowerment, that it works so much faster. It's that flywheel in a different way, a positive flywheel. You can't keep up with that level of innovation and pace for that summation of effort.
And because we're running out of time, but what I do want to say is something really interesting. Not that I want to say something, I think that you said something really interesting. So I'm going to repeat the interesting thing that you said. A lot of companies have invested in that structure, but what I've also, and I agree with you, but what I've also noticed is that those same companies haven't necessarily invested in the leaders so that they know how to operate within that context. And that's the opportunity. I think that's where the leadership opportunity might live, because that's what healing is within that context.
Well, the soft stuff, at the end of the day, we look at the hard numbers of the P&L, and the soft stuff is harder to quantify, but there's data out there that definitely shows. And you can look at something as simple as the, most admired companies are best to work for, outperform the S&P 500.
Yeah, always.
Shocking, but true.
Well, I mean, I guess it's shocking. I never went to MBA school, so maybe I'm not shocked by it. But yeah, it does seem counterintuitive according to the things that we've always learned, or the things that we've considered to be conventional wisdom. And I think that's what's really, really exciting. Oh man, there's so much here. But we are running out of time. So Scott, what I do want to do is I want to say thank you for this. I've learned so much from you, and thank you everyone for joining us too. Scott, if folks who are listening to us want to get a hold of you, what should they do?
Yeah, there's three ways. One is through LinkedIn, Scott McAllister. You can find me. I'm sure right in here there's a link to me. My business is called MCA Executive Services. If you go to www.mca, like the first three letters of my last name, exec services.com, or you can email me at scott@mcaexecservices.com. Any of those three. And one of the other things is I offer a complimentary impact coaching session to folks that are interested in finding their North Star, which I find is a way for me to provide some impact and opportunity for them to see my coaching style. And if that's just one and then done, hopefully I've made a little bit of an impact in the world. And if they want to keep working together, so be it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Scott. And I'm Todd Karges. You can find me at toddkarges.com. And that's a wrap for today.
Thanks,
Thank
Todd,
you
for
so
having
much,
me,
Scott.
man. So
Yeah,
great to be
really
here.
appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.